In the chaotic currents of history, we are often blinded by dazzling halos. We marvel at the fierce charisma of Cao Cao, or the deified intellect of Zhuge Liang. But if we look deeply into the essence of human behavior, the truly dangerous man is not the one standing with a sword, shouting commands to the army. The most terrifying figure is the one hiding in the shadows, bowing lower than everyone else, yet with eyes that coldly pierce through the soul of his superior. That is Sima Yi. His stories, not an epic of earth-shattering battles, but a perfect textbook on the art of survival for a wolf forced to live among a pack of tigers. Let's look at Sima Yi's position when he was forced to step into Cao Cao's camp. This was the phase of setting up the mask. You must understand how harsh the working environment was at that time. Cao Cao was not just a warlord. He was the embodiment of pathological suspicion. Cao Cao lived by a single motto: I would rather betray the world than let the world betray me. Working for such a leader was like walking on a tightrope over an abyss without a safety net. Those who were blatantly intelligent, like Zhang Xiu, met tragic ends. Yang Zhu died because he showed off his cleverness at the wrong time. He thought guessing Cao Cao's mind was smart, but in reality, it was an act of challenging the leader's control. Sima Yi saw Yang Xiu's fei and understood the ultimate rule in this drought-filled environment: never outshine the sun. Sima Yi chose a paradoxical move: absolute submission. You need to distinguish this clearly. Cowardice is when fear paralyzes action. Strategic submission is the ability to control the ego to a masterful degree. Here was a man with earth-shaking talent, carrying the ambition to swallow the empire. Yet he accepted menial tasks and bowed his head to orders without a single complaint. Why could he do that? Because Sima Yi understood that with a paranoid man like Cao Cao, the only safety came from being useful, but completely harmless. He had to turn himself into a sharp tool, but the handle of the sword must always remain firmly in Cao Cao's hand. However, humans cannot completely hide their biological nature. History has recorded in great detail the characteristic wolf glance of Sima Yi. When walking, his body moved forward, but his head could turn backward at an extreme angle without his shoulders moving. This is a predator's raw survival instinct. Only carnivores, those always guarding against attacks from behind, develop such a natural mechanical reflex. Cao Cao saw this. That was the most dangerous moment in Sima Yi's life. Cao Cao once warned Cao Pai, "This man is not one to be content with his lot. He will surely interfere in our family affairs." This was when Cao Cao's predatory instinct smelled another wolf hiding nearby. So how did Sima Yi escape that hanging sword? He did not explain. He was not foolish enough to resist. He utilized the strategy of overcompensation to distract. Knowing he was suspected, Sima Yi buried himself in mundane administrative work. He took on tasks like managing bookkeeping for grain and fodder, even looking after military supplies and horses, completely staying away from major military decisions that could arouse suspicion. He turned himself into a diligent, bureaucratic machine. This action sent a safe message to Cao Cao. Would a man with ambitions of hegemony accept doing these trivial things? Sima Yi bet on the human habit of only believing what they want to believe. No matter how suspicious Cao Cao was, he needed people who could get things done. Seeing Sima Yi working as hard as an ox, the fear in Cao Cao's heart was gradually replaced by the convenience of owning a diligent and obedient employee. Not stopping at hiding, Sima Yi executed another extremely clever psychological move, which was investing in the next generation. He knew he could not win Cao Cao's favor, so he poured all his energy into assisting Cao Pai. This was a strategic partnership. Cao Pai needed Sima Yi's intellect to win this accession in the brutal battle of brothers. Conversely, Sima Yi needed Cao Pai as a shield to protect himself from Cao Cao's scrutiny. By tying his fate to Cao Pai, Sima Yi transformed himself from a suspect into a teacher, an irreplaceable subordinate of the future king. This relationship helped him survive Cao Cao's erratic fits of rage. But the real nightmare was not outside. It was inside his mind. Living under Cao Cao's shadow for decades was a terrible mental pressure. Imagine Sima Yi's nervous tension being at the limit every single day. But he never revealed a single negative emotion outwardly. This is the pinnacle of emotional suppression. He completely separated his personal feelings from his behavioral conduct. He created a fake persona, a shell of a loyal servant, and lived and died with that role. Psychology tells us, those who hide emotions perfectly represent the greatest danger. They have the ability to accumulate resentment and convert it into enduring energy for a long-term plan. Sima Yi understood that time was his most important weapon. Cao Cao was a fierce fire, burning everything in his path. But every fire must eventually go out. Sima Yi chose to be the underground current. Cold, dark, and patient. He knew he could not beat Cao Cao in a direct confrontation. Cao Cao was too strong, too sharp, and too ruthless. Therefore, Sima Yi chose to win by biological laws. He waited for Cao Cao to get old. He waited for Cao Cao to weaken. His tactic was to turn longevity into a weapon in a war of attrition. It was these years of humiliation that forged the ruthless Sima Yi of later times. He learned the harsh lesson that power does not come from showing off strength. Power comes from the ability to hide ambition until the moment no one can stop it anymore. Sima Yi's endurance before Cao Cao was not cowardly submission. It was meticulous preparation. It was like a spring being compressed. The tighter it is compressed, the more terrible the recoil later. He accepted letting his ego be trampled, suspected, and ordered around, just to exchange for one thing: existence. Because in the Game of Thrones, only the living have the right to continue writing history. Heroes who die young are just beautiful ruins by the roadside. Sima Yi chose to be the ugly survivor to eventually become the ruthless winner. And when Cao Cao breathed his last, the wolf Sima Yi did not yet rush to bare his fangs. He knew that the real challenge to Real Prey was still ahead, an opponent who would force him to completely obliterate his ego to win. If surviving Cao Cao was a lesson in concealing one's claws, then confronting Liang was a masterclass in stripping away all human pride. The wolf Sima Yi had survived the tiger Cao Cao, but now he faced a dragon. Liang was not just a military strategist. In the eyes of the people and the soldiers, he was a god who walked among men. Fighting a god is different from fighting a man. You cannot outsmart someone who sees the future. You cannot outmaneuver someone who controls the wind and rain. Sima Yi realized that to defeat a perfect opponent, he had to become something completely imperfect. He had to become a void, a black hole that absorbs all brilliance and returns nothing but silence. The setting of this psychological duel was the Wuzhang Plains. It was a desolate, wind-swept plateau where dragons came to die. This was a stalemate that defined the era. Liang had led his army out of Shu for the 6th time, determined to conquer the north. He had the morale, the strategy, and the divine will. But he lacked one thing. Time. Liang was dying. His health was failing, and his supply lines were stretching thin across the treacherous mountains. He needed a decisive battle. He needed Sima Yi to come out and fight. Sima Yi, with the cold calculation of a predator, diagnosed his opponent's condition immediately. He knew that Liang was desperate for a reaction. He needed the enemy to engage, not just to fight, but to validate his entire strategy. Sima Yi's counter-strategy was the Grey Rock method. This is a technique often used to neutralize toxic manipulators. The rule is simple. Be as boring, unresponsive, and cold as a stone. When the opponent pokes you, you do not bleed. When they scream, you do not echo. You starve them of the emotional reaction they crave. Sima Yi ordered his entire army to stay behind the fortress walls. No matter how much the Shu army shouted insults, challenged their honor, or mocked their ancestors, the Wei army remained silent. This was not passivity. It was an aggressive form of non-engagement. It was a psychological siege designed to break the mind of the attacker. Then came the climax of this psychological warfare, an event that would have shattered the ego of any ordinary man. Liang, frustrated by the silence, decided to launch a devastating blow on Sima Yi's dignity. He sent an emissary to the Wei camp, bearing a gift box. In front of all the Wei generals, proud warriors who lived and died for honor, Sima Yi opened the box. Inside was not a declaration of war, nor a weapon. It was a set of vibrant women's garments and a delicate hairpin. The message was brutal and clear. If you dare not come out and fight like a man, then wear this dress and hide in your hole like a woman. To these proud warriors, this was an insult worse than death. The Wei generals exploded in rage. They demanded to ride out and die rather than suffer this humiliation. Their collective ego was screaming. This is what psychologists call a narcissistic injury, a blow to the self-image that triggers blind rage. If Sima Yi had been a normal man, he would have been forced to fight to save face. If he fought, he would walk straight into Liang's trap and lose everything. But Sima Yi did not rage. He did not overturn the table. He did something that terrified everyone present. He smiled. He picked up the silk dress, felt its texture, and calmly put it on. He wore the insult on his body as if it were a ceremonial robe. He turned to the emissary and asked a simple question. Does it fit? Then, instead of asking about the war, he casually chatted with the emissary about Liang's daily routine. How much does the prime minister eat? How much does he sleep? The emissary, disarmed by this bizarre reaction, answered truthfully that Zhuge Liang ate very little and worked through the night. This moment is the pinnacle of ego death. Sima Yi had successfully detached himself from external insults. He understood a profound truth of dark psychology. An insult only has power if you accept the premise that your worth is defined by the insult. By wearing the dress, Sima Yi reframed the narrative. He was telling Zhuge Liang, "Your social norms do not apply to me. I am willing to be a woman, a dog, or a coward, as long as I win." This is the weaponization of shame. By showing that he could not be humiliated, he stripped Zhuge Liang of his last weapon. The psychological impact reversed instantly. The one who felt the pain was not Sima Yi, but Zhuge Liang. When the report came back that Sima Yi was wearing the dress and asking about his health, Zhuge Liang understood he had lost. He realized he was fighting a man who had no ego to wound. The grey rock had broken the dragon's spirit. Sima Yi's questions about food and sleep were not idle chatter. They were a biological assessment. Upon hearing that Zhuge Liang ate little but worried much, Sima Yi told his subordinates, "He cannot last long." Sima Yi was no longer fighting a military war. He was fighting a biological war. He was betting his own patience against Zhuge Liang's lifespan. It was a cruel, pragmatic, and utterly unglamorous way to win. But it worked. A few months later, a falling star streaked across the sky over the Wujiang plains. The great strategist was dead. He had worked himself to death, trying to crack the stone that was Sima Yi. When the news of Zhuge Liang's death was confirmed, Sima Yi did not cheer. He simply prepared to take over the board. There is a famous saying, "A dead Zhuge scares away a living Sima." When the Shu army retreated, they used a wooden statue of Zhuge Liang to scare Sima Yi's pursuing troops. People mocked Sima Yi for fleeing from a dead man, but Sima Yi just laughed. "I can predict the living, not the dead." Again, we see the absolute lack of ego. He didn't care about being the object of ridicule for 1,000 years. He cared that he was alive, his army was intact, and his greatest rival was gone. The defeat of Zhuge Liang marked the completion of Sima Yi's internal transformation. He had mastered the art of suppressing his ego to an inhuman level. He had learned that honor is often just a beautiful trap for fools. Real power belongs to those who can endure what others cannot. He survived a suspicion of Cao by hiding his ambition. He defeated the brilliance of Zhuge Liang by killing his own pride. Now, standing on the pinnacle of the Wei court, Sima Yi looked around. The external enemies were gone. The old generation was dead. But a new threat was rising. Not from a rival kingdom, but from within his own ranks. The arrogant, incompetent Cao Shuang, a representative of the privileged aristocracy, was tightening the noose around the Sima clan. The wolf, having starved out the dragon, was now forced to play the role of a decrepit, dying old dog. But this time the acting would be for the final blow. The grey rock was about to shatter, and what lay beneath was pure, absolute darkness. With the dragon Zhuge Liang dead, and the tiger Cao long buried, Sima Yi stood at the pinnacle of the era. Yet, the laws of power dictate that a vacuum cannot exist for long. When external enemies vanish, internal demons awaken. The final adversary in Sima Yi's life was not a genius strategist or a ruthless warlord. It was a man named Cao Shuang. If Cao was a tragedy, and Zhuge Liang was a legend, then Cao Shuang was a farce. He was a representative of the third generation of the dynasty, born into immense privilege, inheriting power without ever having to bleed for it. He was arrogant, incompetent, and deeply insecure, but he held the highest military rank in the empire, and his sole obsession was to destroy the Sima clan to consolidate his own authority. For Sima Yi, this was a new kind of test. Fighting a genius requires intellect. Fighting a fool requires patience. Cao Shuang began to strip Sima Yi of his military power, promoting him to a ceremonial title, while filling the court with his own cronies. A younger, hot-blooded Sima Yi might have fought back, but the old wolf, now in his 70s, chose a different path. He understood that against a paranoid and insecure opponent, any sign of strength is a dangerous trigger. To survive, he had to become invisible. He had to become pathetic. He had to execute the ultimate performance of strategic incompetence. Sima Yi resigned from all his posts. Claiming severe illness, he retreated to his mansion, locking the doors and refusing all guests. This was a setup for the most famous acting performance in Chinese history. Cao Shuang, though arrogant, was not entirely stupid. He suspected this might be another one of Sima Yi's tricks, so, On the eve of the Lunar New Year, he sent his most trusted confidant, Li Sheng, to visit the Sima residence. The pretext was to say goodbye before leaving for a provincial post, but the real mission was a final test of his life force. What Li Sheng saw that day was a mind game tailored to what the enemy wanted to believe. Sima Yi sat on his bed, supported by 2 servant girls. His hair hung loose and wild like withered grass. His hands trembled so violently that he could not hold a cup. When he tried to drink porridge, he let the liquid spill out of his mouth, staining his clothes and running down his chest. He looked like a corpse that had forgotten to die. It was a grotesque display of senility. When Li Sheng spoke to him, Sima Yi pretended to be deaf. Li Sheng sighed. "I am going to Bingzhu," Sima Yi replied with a confused, trembling voice. "Oh, you are going to Jin? That is good," Li Sheng corrected him. "No, Grand Tutor, I said Bingzhu." Sima Yi stared blankly and said, "You are going to Jin. Be careful." Li Sheng had a shout directly into his ear multiple times before the old man seemed to comprehend. By the end of the meeting, Sima Yi was gasping for air, whispering that he was on the verge of death and begging Li Sheng to look after his sons. This was a masterstroke of manipulation. Cao Shuang desperately wanted to believe that Sima Yi was finished. He wanted to believe that the heavy shadow hanging over his head was finally gone so he could enjoy his power and peace. Sima Yi gave him exactly the evidence he craved. When Li Sheng returned and reported that the old man is already a candle in the wind, his mind is gone, his body is failing. Cao Shuang laughed. He laughed with the relief of a man who thought he had won the lottery. He said, "The old dog is dying. I can finally sleep." And with that laughter, he signed his own fate. Sima Yi understood that the most effective disguise is not to hide, but to display exactly what the enemy expects to see. By presenting himself as a harmless, disgusting, dying old man, he deactivated Cao Shuang's survival instincts. The predator played the role of the routing carcass, and the scavenger lowered his guard. For 2 years, Sima Yi maintained this charade. He lay in bed, waiting. He watched as Cao Shuang became increasingly reckless, taking the young emperor out on hunting trips, leaving the capital unguarded. Confident that there were no threats left in the city, Sima Yi was waiting for one specific moment, a moment of absolute vacancy. That moment arrived in the year 249 AD. It is known to history as the incident at the Gaoping Tombs. On a crisp winter morning, Cao Shuang and his entire faction, along with the emperor, left the capital city of Liang to pay respects at the royal tombs. They took the entire royal guard with them. The city was empty. The tiger had left its den. The moment the royal procession disappeared over the horizon, the sick old man threw off his blankets. The trembling hands stopped shaking. The deaf ears could suddenly hear the drop of a pin. Sima Yi stood up, his eyes burning with the cold fire of a man who had held his breath for a decade. He donned his armor, summoned his phantom 3,000 loyal soldiers he had been hiding and training. Right under Cao Shuang's nose and seized the city. The speed of the operation was terrifying. Within hours, Sima Yi had seized the armory, locked the city gates, and taken control of the Empress Dowager's palace to legitimize his coup. He closed the net. When Cao Shuang received the news at the tombs, he was paralyzed. He had the emperor, he had the royal seal. He could have issued an edict declaring Sima Yi a rebel and called upon the armies of the realm to crush the capital. But Sima Yi knew his opponent better than his opponent knew himself. He knew Cao Shuang was a man of luxury, not a man of war. Sima Yi sent a letter to Cao Shuang. In the letter he swore by the Luo Rivarda, most sacred oath of the time, that he only wanted to strip Cao Shuang of his military power. He promised that if Cao Shuang surrendered, he would be allowed to live as a wealthy nobleman for the rest of his life. It was a seductive offer. It appealed to Cao Shuang's greed and his fear of hardship. His advisors begged him to fight, screaming that surrendering meant death. But Cao Shuang looked at his soft hands, thought of his concubines and his wine, and chose the easy path. He threw down his sword and said, "I can still be a rich man." It was wrong. The moment Cao Shuang surrendered and returned to the city, the trap snapped shut. Sima Yi arrested him immediately. The charge was treason. Sima Yi did not just execute Cao Shuang. He ordered a total purge of Cao Shuang's entire clan and the clans of his key supporters. This is known as exterminating the 3 clans. Men, women, children, infants, everyone related to the faction was dragged to the market square. The execution ground of Liang turned into a sea of chaos. Thousands of lives were ended. When asked why he was so ruthless after swearing a sacred oath, Sima Yi did not offer a philosophical justification. He simply acted. He understood that in the game of power, mercy is a liability left for the history books. But survival is written in the present tense. He had promised to spare Cao Shuang's life to get him to open the gates. Once the gates were open, the promise had served its purpose. Here, his true nature was revealed. Ruthless, cold, and calculating, he twisted sacred oaths and human trust to achieve his goal. The grey rock had shattered, and from it emerged a monster. The incident at the Gaoping Tombs was not a battle. It was a liquidation. It marked the end of the Cao family's dominance and the beginning of the Sima era. The man who had spent his life bowing, hiding, and pretending to be a fool had finally stood up. And when he stood up, he cast a shadow that covered the entire empire. He had devoured the legacy of Cao Cao. He had outlived the brilliance of Zhuge Liang, and he had dismantled the incompetence of Cao Shuang. Sima Yi stood alone in the court of Wei. No one dared to look him in the eye. They realized too late that the most dangerous person in the room was never the one shouting commands. It was the quiet old man in the corner, the one who spilled his porridge, the one they laughed at. They realized that while they were playing checkers, he had been playing a game of biological endurance and psychological dissection. The wolf had not just survived. He had become the owner of the forest. The snow had settled on the Gaoping Tombs, burying the bodies of the Cao clan. But for Sima Yi, the winter never truly ended. He had achieved the impossible. He had outlived the tiger Cao Cao, outsmarted the dragon Zhuge Liang, and dismantled the fool Cao Shuang. At the age of 70, he stood as the absolute ruler of the Wei Empire. The emperor was nothing more than a puppet in his hand. The court was filled with his sons and loyalists. But as he looked out over the capital of Lu, Sima Yi realized the terrifying truth. The higher you climb the mountain of the fallen, the thinner the air becomes. This final chapter of his life was not a victory lap. It was a descent into paranoia. This is the curse of the usurper. When you seize power through betrayal, you lose the ability to trust. You see your own reflection in the eyes of every subordinate. Sima Yi had spent his life acting as the loyal servant to hide his ambition. Now, he suspected every servant around him was acting, just as he had done. He became trapped in a prison of his own making. 2 years after the coup, a rebellion broke out in the region of Weinan, led by a general named Wang Ling. Wang Ling was an old loyalist of the Cao family, a man who saw Sima Yi for what he truly was, a thief of the state. Sima Yi was 73 years old. His body was failing. He should have sent a younger general. He should have rested. But the paranoia of the dictator would not let him sleep. He insisted on leading the army himself. Imagine the sight. A 73-year-old man, frail and dying, strapped onto a war horse, marching hundreds of miles to crush a rebellion. This was not courage. It was fear. It was the frantic desperation of a man who knows that if he lets go of the sword for even 1 second, the ghosts of the past will catch up to him. He crushed Wang Ling with the same cold efficiency he used on Cao Shuang. He forced Wang Ling to take his own life. But this time, there was no satisfaction. There was only exhaustion. On the march back to Liang, Sima Yi fell ill. The illness was not just physical. It was psychosomatic. History records that in his delirious fever dreams, he saw the ghosts of those he had eliminated. He saw Wang Ling. They were not screaming. They were waiting. He told his sons, "I dream of Jiakui and Wang Ling striking me." Jiakui was another loyalist he had wronged. His ruthless nature protected him from guilt, but not from his own nightmares. At the end of the road, the mind fractures. In September of the year 251, the Wolf of Wei lay on his deathbed. His sons, Sima, Shi, and Sima Zhao, gathered around him. These were the wolves he had raised. They were sharper, crueler, and more ambitious than he ever was. Sima Yi looked at them and delivered his final instructions. But he did not speak of glory. He spoke of caution. He said, "I have served the Wei dynasty for many years, but the world suspects me of ambition. After I die, you must manage the affairs of the state with great care. Do not rush to take the throne even in death." Sima Yi was playing the long game. He knew that to declare himself emperor now would be to invite chaos. He chose to die as a Han official on paper, leaving the dirty work of usurpation to his descendants. He wanted the power, but he wanted to escape the judgment of history. It was his final act of strategic hypocrisy. He wanted to be remembered as the loyal minister who was forced to take power, not the traitor who stole it. When Sima Yi breathed his last, the era of the three kingdoms did not end instantly, but the board had been flipped. The Cao family was finished. The Shu kingdom was leaderless. The Wu kingdom was crumbling. The foundation for the Sima clan's Jin dynasty had been laid, but here lies the ultimate tragedy of Sima Yi's legacy. He built his empire on a foundation of absolute ruthlessness and betrayal. He taught his sons that oaths are meaningless, that trust is a weakness, and that power justifies everything. And his descendants learned that lesson too well. Years later, his grandson Sima Yi would officially force the emperor to abdicate and establish the Jin dynasty, uniting all of China. It seemed like the ultimate victory. The Sima clan had won the Game of Thrones. But a dynasty built on the philosophy of the wolf creates a family of wolves. The Jin dynasty became one of the most chaotic and corrupt periods in Chinese history. The princes of the Sima clan, lacking any moral compass or loyalty to each other, turned on one another in a conflict known as the War of the Eight Princes. This war was his own karma, magnified 1,000 times. The princes did not just fight. They betrayed each other with poisonous plots and false oaths, mimicking their ancestors' tactics. In their desperation for power, they committed the ultimate sin. They hired barbarian mercenaries to fight their own brothers. They opened the gates of the empire to foreign tribes, just as Sima Yi had opened the gates of Liang with a lie. They destroyed their own family, weakened the state, and left the door open for foreign invasions, leading to 300 years of darkness and fragmentation for China. Sima Yi's philosophy of survival at all costs resulted in a legacy that could not survive itself. He destroyed the Cao clan to protect his family, only to create a culture that would lead to his family destroying itself. So, what is the final lesson of Sima Yi? We look at him with a mixture of awe and horror. He represents the absolute peak of dark psychology. He mastered the art of hiding, the art of endurance, and the art of deception. He proved that in a chaotic world, the one who wins is not the strongest or the smartest, but the one who can detach himself from his ego and his humanity. But he also teaches us the terrible price of that victory. Sima Yi spent his entire life in a state of high-functioning anxiety. He never had a friend he didn't plot against. He never had a master he didn't plan to overthrow. He lived 73 years, but he never truly lived. He only survived. He was a prisoner of his own intelligence, a captive of his own caution. In the end, the wolf stood alone on the mountaintop, surrounded by the silence of dead rivals and the cold wind of a future he had poisoned. He won the world, but he lost his soul. And perhaps, as he closed his eyes for the last time, he realized that the view from the summit was not worth the climb. This concludes the story of Sima Yi. In the game of power, there are no winners, only survivors who haven't died yet.